toward to this computer. Perfect.
Yep.
All right. Hello and welcome to Just Animals podcast. I'm Elle, and with me as always is my dad, Guy.
Oh, it seems like just yesterday, Pod World, that we were doing this.
The episode hasn't come out yet. And then we have a very special guest today, Dr. Alex Sliwa. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. So go ahead, Dr. Alex, Dr. Sliwa. Go give our listeners a little background on who you are, what you do, and we'll get into it.
Okay, I'm a 57-year-old biologist, zoologist, working at the Cologne Zoo as a curator currently, but by training, I'm a behavioral ecologist, having worked in Africa for more than 30 years now by now, and I still continue to do that part of my job while I'm here based in Cologne, West Germany, caring for lots of different animals as a curator in respect that I'm the boss of about 30 keepers.
Wow.
Looking after the different animals, ranging from hippopotamus and fish, reptiles, but mainly actually mammals, and I'm a specialist on carnivores.
Okay, very cool. So today's episode is a very special one where we have Dr. Sliwa as our special guest, but this is a special request episode from Emmy in California. And today we're going to be discussing the Aardwolf. And so go ahead, Dr. Sliwa, what's their scientific name? How did they get their regular name, genus? You know, what are these animals for those that don't know?
It's a very special mammal because I studied it for 2.5 years in Central South Africa, starting with a name. It's called Aardwolf, and most people already know the name, the first part, Aard,
right,
which is the old Dutch word for earth.
Okay.
The soil, the ground. And wolf, you know, is the same as in English and also in German. It's the wolf of the earth. And
okay.
It just describes that this animal takes shelter over daytime in burrows, in dens which are dug into the ground, and people encountered it mostly when they come up to these dens, and then the wolf comes out and growls at them. So that's why it's the Aardwolf.
Okay.
But it has actually very little to do with wolves because it's in a small family of the Hyenidae, which is the hyenas, and it's a very odd one out of the hyenas because it's the only one who doesn't have very strong dentition. Actually has almost peg-like small lateral teeth like premolars and molars, only very sharp canines. And it's much smaller than all the other hyenas. There's actually only 4 species in the hyena. And so since it's a hyena, a very aberrant hyena, it's more related to cats and to the so-called genets and civets, which is another family of carnivores. And if you look at its scientific name, it's called Proteles cristatus. Pro means front, and telos is the sort of the ends of the fingers in this case. And it actually says that it has 5 toes on the front feet. The ones, sort of the thumb, as in us people, is raised above the ground. It doesn't touch the ground. But the 4 other ones are like in dogs, you know, touching the ground. You actually see the prints of the nails. And it's different to the other hyenas in this respect because the other 3 hyena species, which is the spotted hyena, the brown, and the striped hyena, they only have 4 toes left. So that's why the describers in 1724, it was described, so already quite a while ago, actually gave it this genus name, Proteles. And cristatus means crested. So it has a very long and strongly patterned crest of long hair. The hairs are up to 25 centimeters long. And if the Aardwolf raises this crest of hair, it doubles his size, you know. So for everybody, well, particularly predators and competitors attacking it, it's a very stunning visual display that makes it much, much bigger. And also, in addition, you know, why people called it the wolf, it's not a very big animal. It ranges between 8 to 12 kilograms.
Okay.
So I would say roughly the size of a Cocker Spaniel.
Okay.
People know what this is.
Right.
It has a very dark, deep voice, and it actually growls really, really deeply. So So if you meet such a aardwolf, you are very impressed, because it roars at you and also has very sharp canines retaining, just for defense.
Okay.
So actually, I think it's a quite a good name.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's also confusing to a certain degree.
Sure. So what's their lifespan like in the wild then? Do we know?
It's, again, I have to start a bit wider. It hasn't been that well researched. I mean, most of the research has taken place actually where I also started and ended my research for 2.5 years. It was done by my supervisor in the late 70s. He studied them for 3-4 years. Then there was a master student who carried on for a couple of years, and I was sort of the third study. So it has been studied for roughly about 10 years. And sorry, I forgot your question. Sorry about this.
Oh, that's okay. Like their average lifespan, do we know
average
that?
lifespan? So you see that explains why we don't have accurate data from the wild, because to establish the whole length of the lifespan of an animal in the wild, you need to study it for a long time. But we think aardwolves can get up to 8 to 10 years in the wild, while the record in captivity is 15 years.
Okay. Wow.
So I need to get some vocabulary out of the way, because I am on a website called animalia.bio/aardwolf. And some of the ways they're describing this animal is cursorial, which I didn't know. I just looked it up. That means to be able to run.
Yeah.
But there is a word here I would like you to define for us. It's viviparous. Am I pronouncing? Viviparous?
Yeah.
What does that mean, please?
Viviparous, it gives birth to live and complete young. So it's not laying eggs, to put it short.
Oh,
it's just mammal birds.
Okay, it's a mammal.
Which would be, that's it. Which would be ovoviviparous or oviparous if it would be laying eggs. So it's just it's live bearing like all mammals.
Okay, we've heard the word before, artificial. That means they're ready to go, right, when they come out?
No, artificial means that it's sort of I'm lacking the English terms here. So the young are born quite helpless and the eye is closed and they take a while to develop,
Precocious is the opposite.
So like dogs and cats,
Yes, they require nourishment. Yes, thank you.
So are they what's their are they dimorphic? Are males bigger than females, or are they kind of the same size?
They are the same size. Which is again, linked to the social system, which I can explain in detail a bit later.
Sure.
So both partners take the same role in defending a territory. They are actually highly territorial.
Okay.
And since both of them defend the territory against members of the same sex, so females defend the territory against other females and males against other males, they take the same part. I mean, they're equipped in the same way. A bit similar to gibbons, gibbons, the apes, the small apes, primates, they are also same size. And they have the same length of canines, and they do the same chores in defending the territory.
Okay.
It says they're monogamous.
So we'll get to that. So what's their ideal habitat then? I mean, obviously, I'm assuming desert kind of, but what's the ideal aardwolf habitat if they could have their dream habitat?
It's exactly where we studied these aardwolves. So it's ranges between short grass savanna, short grass steppe, and savanna.
Okay.
So a steppe is essentially without any trees, so just some bushes, and particularly in the area where we studied them close to Kimberley in central South Africa, it's short grass with small bushes. And then also the savanna is sort of a dry tropical savanna with isolated trees, that's so-called camel thorn trees. And the ideal habitat is between 100 millimeter to 600 millimeters of rain every year.
Wow.
And my study area was roughly around 350 millimeters a year. So if you compare that to, let's say, California has probably also in some parts between 200 and 600 millimeters of rain. So California would be a nice climate for an aardwolf.
Oh, okay. Perfect. So then what's their diet? What do they eat then? What's the ideal aardwolf meal?
That's actually, there is only one meal for aardwolves.
Okay.
They are highly specialized.
Okay.
It's probably one of the most dietarily specialized mammals of the world. It's sort of, the termite eating, ant eating mammals of the world is the pangolins, the aardvark, the anteaters, the giant anteaters, and all the different anteaters of the edentates in South America. And there is a lot of specializations involved. So aardwolves eat 92% one species of termites.
Wow.
Which is the snouted harvester termite. And they gear their whole life to that, because these snouted harvester termites, they have a soldier caste, which is defending a swarm of workers which come above ground at night, because they're sensitive to UV light. They can't tolerate UV light. Oh. And these snouted harvester termites, they have big glands in their head with noxious secretions. And these secretions, they squirt onto predators that come their way. It's mainly ants which are predate them, but also the aardwolf. And these chemicals are so bad tasting. They are terpenes. So if you would be drinking turpentine, you would retch, you would just throw up. And there's very few mammals in the world who can tolerate this. And actually the aardwolf is the one which can tolerate a certain amount. And it's actually a very funny story. They have to acquire the tolerance over their own development to it. So young cubs which start to feed on termites, they throw up. They throw up on the food that they have to eat the rest of their life in the first couple of weeks.
So I'd like to take us on a little bit of a tangent. Since you're a curator, do you have any aardwolves in your collection?
No, unfortunately not, but we have aardvarks, and obviously I would like aardwolves, but to be honest, I've studied them in the wild, and I've seen quite a few aardwolves in zoos, mainly in the US. Actually, there's a couple of zoos in the USA who keep them.
Oh, no kidding.
And to me, it's always a bit hard, if you studied an animal in the wild and you know it so well, and then to see it in a zoo, even if the zoo cares really well for it, they don't look the same. They look a little different. And whenever I go there, I always make small remarks. Oh, you should feed this and you should do that.
Well, so let me go down the road I wanted to go down, which is nutrition for the animals in a captive setting versus a wild setting. We have a company here in America called Missouri. I don't know if you've ever heard of Missouri.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, and we spoke to their animal nutritionist, and I was asking, because I'm mildly interested in human nutrition, and there are items that you're not going to get in a dry format that the animal needs, like essential fatty acids. And I don't want to take you too far down the rabbit hole. Hopefully you understand what that means. It's an English expression, American expression. You're getting off track, but I would like you to talk a little bit about how you try to maintain a natural environment for the food sources of your animals, and what supplements you have to use to try to get to that place. So go ahead.
Okay, this is again a complicated story, but it's actually, I can give you the example for the aardvarks and also for the giant anteaters, which we are keeping, which are also specialized termite and ant-eating animals. And obviously we also use a similar company to Missouri. We also tried Missouri. They also have a termite eater formula, which is made up out of ground. It's mainly grains that they ground in a very fine powder, and they also have supplements in different, as you say, fatty acids and fats, and they also include some crustaceans and so on. But obviously, it's not termites and it's not ants that they use because it's too difficult, to source this material. And our animals are looking quite nice, they're looking quite well. Although aardvarks don't have many hairs, so the coat is not as good looking. And actually, also our animals reproduce well. They get old, and it's an easy to use formula. But obviously, some small details are missing, and although these food producing companies for zoo animals, they try their best, and they also work together with people working in the wild on these animals. They just can't nail it on the head because, particularly with the aardwolf, they have long fasting periods. They also, while they eat these termites, I also have to go into the detail there, they take up a lot of sand. Because they lick the termites off the surface of the ground. They don't dig for them. They have very small feet, not very strong like an aardvark or like an anteater. and they take up a lot of sand, and that that is also working in the whole digestive system. And keepers have difficulties in providing these animals with enough tasty sand. Also these zoo animals are used to getting their food. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take my phone off.
No worries.
Getting the food in. Sort of, it's not exactly the right ground soil, the same taste, and also zoo animals grew up in the zoo, so they're not used to eating things that they would learn from their parents in the wild. So even if I want to improve on the food of some of my animals, and mixing some substances is often zoo animals don't accept it. So it's a bit of a complicated question sometimes. And
sure.
But as I say, some animals are, if you see them in the zoo, they don't look perfectly the same as in the wild. Right. Also, you must also think about it. The animals you see in the wild very often are in their healthiest and strongest expression. They are the survivors. Right. Of a lot of animals that get born and survive sort of the selection out there in the wild. Predators, droughts, good food, bad food. So you see actually a strong selection, while in zoos, we tend to, because we give good nutrition, we look after them with veterinary medicine. So we also pull through some individuals which are not looking so good, which are not perfectly strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of as I would explain it there.
So, shoot, I forgot my question. Oh my God, that's terrible. Okay, go ahead, Bunny. Go ahead.
So yes, okay. So you're saying that they also are eating sand, which
that was my question.
How does that work? Is the sand useful for digestion, or does that back them up, or?
That's what I wanted to get sort of my point at is these wild animals, because they have to lick up these termites from the soil, they take up small pieces of grass and particularly sand and soil, and that also mixes in with all these termites. And I don't think they extract any nutrition from the sand, but the sand is sort of like the fibers in our food. If we eat, a healthy diet, we should also include a certain percentage of fibers in our food. We shouldn't just eat pure proteins or pure fats.
Right.
So this is how I explain. The whole digestive system also needs these additional compounds, which are not digested, but which are apparently crucial, for the well-being of the animal.
Okay.
So do you think I should give up psyllium husk and transfer to sand, or stay with the psyllium husk?
I think the latter.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's
I do live in the desert.
Yeah, so I guess when all else fails, we'll go to sand. Okay, wow. So then, are they solitary or are they pack animals?
And the right term, and we heard it from Guy, is that they are socially monogamous. So they are monogamous, but the term social comes that a female and a male, they cooperate in defending one territory, and they care for the dependent young. They kick out the young once they are independent with 1 year, and they have the next litter. And the term socially monogamous is that they're unfit. What's the term? They have extra pair copulations, so they are not faithful to each other.
Okay.
So if a female sees a chance to mate with a neighbor, she may sneak over there, and if the neighbor gets a chance during mating season, or a strong guy comes in, she also copulates with him. And it's again a very complex situation. I also have to explain with the social system. So as I say, during the bigger part of the year, they are working as a pair in defending the territory with roughly 3,000 termite mounds. Okay. Each termite mound has 55,000 termites in it, and they defend that very discrete resource by scent marking all around this territory, and actually telling all the other aardwolves stay out, because this is our patch, and we are defending it because we have to, look after ourselves and our cubs to sustain them. And that's sort of the minimum in my study area that they need in terms of resource. And in the mating season, which is just a month, the actual mating season just a month in mid-June to mid-July in South Africa. And the whole sort of social system breaks down. And actually, if a male is very strong, healthy, he has stored a lot of fat from the summer by feeding a lot. He's able to fight off all these males coming in. And he's making sure that he's following his female around, making sure that she's not infidel. She's not walking over to the neighbor, because there's a very good reason for it, that he wants to make sure that he's the father of the cubs. He's also mating his wife, you could say, or his partner. And because he's contributing significantly as a faithful father when the cubs are born after a month. The cubs are born in mid-September normally. And when the female goes off to feed, because she's lactating, she's giving milk, she needs to go out and lick up termites, to sustain herself and to build all the milk. And during that time, the cubs are alone in the den. Oh. And the father plays a very crucial role in defending that den against predators, which is the black-backed jackal. Black-backed jackal have been found to go into these dens and kill the cubs and eat Aardwolf's cubs. Oh. And if there's no father around, if the father thinks that his wife has been unfaithful, he's not a good father. So he's not guarding the cubs. Oh, and a really faithful father spends up to 6 hours of the night, which is half of the night, in guarding these cubs. And the female can go off and feed, and by that, build up condition and convert that also into milk, because aardwolves are not like canids. They don't regurgitate food. Mm-hmm. So they because also the food is very noxious, it has all these funny secretions and it's difficult to digest. And that's why the mother has to, do this actual feeding herself. And the father can only contribute by watching the cubs at the den. That was also part of my thesis, because I watched all these different dens and I looked how long the different males were spending time at the den. And I also looked at which animals were mating with each other. It's a very complex system. And again, very geared to this very resource, which is the termites.
So you said that if the father knew that his wife was, or the mother was unfaithful, that he wouldn't watch the kids. And how would he know? I mean, would she have check paw prints going over to the neighbor's house, or?
That's it's very difficult to say. What I can summarize quickly, there is different types of father. There's fathers which are very diligent. There must be some sort of certainty that they are the only, or there must be that most of the cubs come from them. They have sired themselves. Mm-hmm. While I had, for instance, an old male, which is very bulky, very, very old and very self-confident. He fed all summer, got really fat, and then he walked around all the different territories of the neighborhood and mated with all the females, and he didn't care at all about any cubs. So he just put all his resources into fattening up in summer and then beating up all the other guys, and not care about any of the cubs. My theory is, and that is also a bit of a complex issue, is there's sort of a, first of all, aardwolves can smell extremely well. They have a very fine sense of smell. Also, they can have good hearing and very good eyesight. I mean, they're extremely well equipped in this respect, which is very opposite to all the other termite eaters. I mean, the other termite eaters have very poor eyesight. Anteaters, aardvarks, pangolin, you can forget their sense of sight. They're so aardwolves are so they have a very good sense of smell, because that's how they find termites. And also their whole communication system is built upon this sense of smell, and they can certainly distinguish between male and female. And they would certainly, a male that comes up to his female, to his partner, would smell another male having mated her, because the mating takes a very, very long time. And aardwolf, shouldn't say it too loudly, because then it would be a competitor to the rhinos, because average mating time of an aardwolf is between 1 and 4.5 hours.
Holy mackerel.
being clasped to the female. The male
Wow.
is mounting the female up to 4.5 hours.
Gee,
Oh my God.
that's a long time.
What he actually does, they don't form a lock like dogs, but he's actually clamping her. So he's on her back and he's clamping her with his forelegs, trying to hold on. And about once every hour, there is an ejaculation. You can see that tail is bobbing up and down. And then after about 2 hours, the female has enough. So she starts walking back to the den. And she's walking back to her den. And sometimes when the male is clever, he has led her far away from her den where she stays. So she has a long way to walk back with him on the back. I mean, he's heavy.
Holy mackerel.
So she's walking back with her. And the final separation thing is always the female goes down her den and the male stays at the den entrance because he's pushed off. He's pushed off when she goes down the den, you know. So it's interesting. The male and the female sort of have their own way in controlling the length of the mating. And what is also interesting that these sort of extra pair copulations, the males that come in from outside, which are not the fathers, which are not the sort of the faithful fathers, they are not allowed to mate very, very long. So they usually mate just an hour or hour and a half, while normally the pair male is mating much longer. So his chances of siring the cubs is higher. But I'm sure, as I said, you know, coming back to your question, how does this male know that his female has been faithful? I think they can smell it. And they probably also have a lot of different glands. And one is also part of my thesis. I worked together with people in histology. So we dissected a road casualty Aardwolf that it was run over and found very freshly. And there is a specialized gland close to the penis of the male, which are called the penile pad. It's been published. And that also secretes a secretion. So I even think that this penile pad is sort of marking the female when the male is mounting her. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, how this is evolutionary significant, you know, who sort of why this was selected for. But you know, I can clearly see that Aardwolves have such a fantastic sense of smell that they can actually, you know, they will know. They will know that there was an extra pair copulation.
That's insane.
Getting off of sex and going back to nutrition.
Why?
I guess the not that I dislike sex. I'm fine with it. But
okay.
The question I have for you is that the Aardwolf health and prosperity is tied into termite mounds. So we need to then ask the question: what keeps the termite mound healthy? What type of environment is it? It has to have enough rain, water. You know, what are the supporting aspects of the termite mound?
Yeah, so as I said, these snouted harvester termites, which are the majority of the fruit, they're called Trinervitermes trinavoides. They and as the name says, harvester, they are mainly feeding on dry grass. So there has to be enough rain over the course of the year, mainly in summer, that when this grass dries, the termites can come up over their channels. You know, so the termite mound is sort of just an outside view of their the hive, if you could compare it to bees. You know, sort of their place where the queen sits and where they have their fungus gardens and so on. You know, it's a very complex system, ventilation and so on. But what the actual workers of the termites do, they go above ground and they are guarded by these soldiers with these noxious secretions, and they cut dry grass pieces, very small dry grass pieces, and bring them back into the termite mound. In the termite mound, these are fermented and fungi are grown, and then obviously the termites eat the fungi, and then they nurture their queen and the king, and that's how this termite mound, the colony, as you would say, is maintained over years. And there's only a couple of predators which can either break through the termite mound, which is the aardvark. You know, it digs into the termite mound and sometimes kills the termite mound and the whole colony when it devours also the queen. But the Aardwolf never takes the queen. You know, it always takes just the workers and some of the soldiers. And actually very interesting, you know, when this sort of you could see it as a troop, a troop that leaves the termite mound, goes above ground, forages, cuts the grass, and brings it back. The aardwolf can smell the secretion of the soldiers when they are getting attacked by ants, and they always walk downwind. And once they smell the secretion, they turn into the wind, and they walk up straight to what swarm above ground, and they start licking the swarm from the grass and from the ground. And they stop licking when the ratio of the soldiers to the workers is getting too high. So when there's too much noxious secretion, they abandon it. They never kill the whole sort of swarm that is above ground. So it's a highly, highly interesting, how they sort of limit the intake of noxious substances, and by that time also keep their renewable food resource, going. They don't kill the whole swarm.
So how many termites do they eat on average?
Oh,
sorry.
One question at a time.
Yeah, sorry. How many termites do they eat on average in a night?
It can be in a good warm summer night. So aardwolves get active about half an hour after sunset. Okay. And they usually retire 1 or 2 hours before sunrise, sometimes already at 1 o'clock at night. So they get in a good 7-8 hours of foraging. And during that time, they can eat up to 300,000 termites. Wow. A termite is minute, obviously.
Right.
And so if you would translate that, they can eat roughly about 1.2 kilogram of things that they take up. And obviously there's 40% sand involved, and some grass stalks, which they lick up in the same sort of time. Aardwolves have very big tongues, very broad. And on the tongues, there's little spatula-like structures which almost work like a comb, So that's why they lick up, and they all obviously, like all the other termite eaters, have a lot of saliva, and that saliva is making the tongue sticky, and by that they lick up these termites from the ground.
Wow. Okay.
So here in the southwest part of the United States, we're suffering from a 1,000-year drought, extremely dry. How is the conditions where their habitat is?
There is say, obviously the records are not that old in comparison, let's say, to other parts of the world, that there is roughly a 7 or 8 year cycle of drought and wet parts. Mm-hmm. And we also had periods where there's just 100 or 200 millimeters of rain instead of the average 350, and it can go up to 600 millimeters of rain. But you must also know that termites don't like it to be too wet. So if it constantly rains and the grass always remains green, it doesn't die back. And if the grass is wet and they transport these pieces back into the termite mound, the mushroom colony gets out of control. It's you actually sometimes have mushrooms shooting out of the termite mound. So too much rain is also not good. So this is sort of the ideal situation. It should stay in a certain range of rain. But you're right, if there's an absolute drought, there's no grass coming back, grass is being devoured by the termites, and then obviously the whole productivity of the area is decreasing. All the ungulates, all the different antelopes, they get thin and they die, and also termites and termite mounds die. So too little rain is also not good, and obviously that also works on aardwolves. If the termite mounds are not productive, then they don't have enough food to feed themselves and the cubs.
Gotcha.
So you see a direct correlation in terms of weather patterns and the population.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. But it should also not be too wet. There is changes in weather patterns all over the world, and in some parts of the world we get much more rain. For instance, just the last couple of months in South Africa and Namibia, and Botswana, there was incredible rains. There's parts of the desert which haven't received rains for decades have got a lot of rain.
Wow.
So that will shift a lot of the distribution areas of different mammals.
Okay. So what's typical aardwolf behavior then? I mean, obviously they're nocturnal. They have their social monogamy. What's some other kind of quirks to their behavior?
Actually, interesting that a guy said cursorial, which means walking or running. So they do spend a lot of time walking and running. On average, they They would
Okay.
cover about 8 to 12 kilometers a night, you know, in
Wow.
their territory, which is roughly between 1 square kilometer and 6 square kilometers in surface area. And actually, they are not really, to me, they're not really carnivores. I mean, they're in the carnivore family, but
Right.
they are, to me, more like a cow, you know. So they go from one patch to the next, and they go, they find the swarm, they lick, lick up the termites, then they walk up, they walk again a bit, they find the next swarm. So all night, you know, their behavior is not so interesting, you know.
Right.
If you watch them, I watched them 530 nights, and
wow.
I tallied up 3,500 hours of watching Aardwolves, and I followed them for 2,300 kilometers. So,
wow.
So I've seen a lot of Aardwolf bums for many, many hours, you know, watching them. And the most interesting behavior was the part of my thesis, which was their scent marking behavior, you know, how do they communicate amongst themselves and so on. And that's so-called the paste marking behavior. So roughly every 100 meters, they squat down, they exert their anal pouch, which is a specialized sort of organ that has smelly secretion on it, very complex compounds of fatty acids, actually. And they smear roughly about 1 centimeter of secretion onto a grass stalk. And that paste mark that also other hyenas use for communication carries a lot of information in, you know, what's your identity, what's your sex, what is your sexual status, you know, are you in estrus or not, you know, maybe also your dominance and probably also your condition. Yeah? I mean, like, what these animals are pasting there is fat. And fat is a rare commodity in wild animals. So they can probably smell, you know, the content of fat. And so as these animals can smell extremely well, I think this sort of paste mark can tell them a lot about the animal that left it. And also, what I also found out in my research, it plays a big role where these paste marks are deposited. Let's say if they are deposited on the outside of the territory, as you can see, like a wall, like a reinforcement of the territory.
Right.
That's sort of average, you know, the neighbors know the border extremely well. And, okay, I'm coming to the border, you know, there will be my scent marks, and there will be the neighbor's scent marks. That's nothing extraordinary. But it changes completely their behavior if they find a scent mark of a neighbor. That's still okay. You know, the neighbors are allowed to, you know, to have a little excursion into my territory. But the worst is if there's a stranger coming in, you know, and a stranger is the one that's challenging you at some point for your territory. The neighbors respect each other to a certain degree. I mean, I haven't never seen a takeover between two neighbors, but I have seen takeovers from strangers coming in. That is a real threat. That's the real threat. And the worst is if this threat is deposited at your den, you know, at your home. If you could just think, you know, somebody is putting a tomahawk on your doorstep, you know, so that would be a real threat to your livelihood.
Right. You know? Claiming this is mine now. This is mine. Thanks.
So do they get along with other hyenas, or do they not mess with other hyenas?
No, they are much smaller. You know, an Aardwolf is 50% of the size of the next smallest hyena, which is the striped hyena, and their ranges only overlap in East Africa. In South Africa, you have them share the same range as with brown hyenas and spotted hyenas. And spotted hyenas can be 60 to almost 80 kilograms, and a brown hyena about 40 kilograms. So they're about 3/4 of the size.
Quite a size difference. Yes.
Yeah. Although I don't think that brown hyenas hunt Aardwolves. You know, they in complete ecosystems there have been some records of cheetahs killing Aardwolves. But I think their main, and leopards also kill Aardwolves in, let's say, in the Kalahari, in certain national parks, which still have these large predators. But I think that one of the main predators of the young is definitely black-backed jackal, you know, because as long as they're not big and strong, they can't defend themselves, and sometimes also snakes.
So currently, how is the population doing? Are they stable, increasing, decreasing? How are they doing?
It's a difficult to answer question. It's least concern in the IUCN Red List criteria, so it's not threatened. A lot of people who go on safari to Africa are very keen on seeing aardwolves. Very few people see them, but there's a very clear reason, because they're nocturnal.
Right, yeah.
So you have to go out and look for them specifically. But I personally think they are very common. They're actually quite common. And I would say the population is stable. And in some parts of Southern Africa, people still think that aardwolf would take lambs. So there would be a problem for small livestock holders. But it's a matter of education of the farming communities, to tell them this is a harmless termite eater. It cannot even eat a larger insect, like a beetle. Right. Cannot eat it like a dragonfly. It's impossible to eat something bigger than a termite. I've seen aardwolf try, but the whole structure of their tongue and the whole feeding apparatus is so strange. They can't really swallow something bigger than, as they say. I mean, not even a mouse. So it's definitely not a threat to the farming community that they would kill a lamb. It's just that idea comes from, there's an animal in the den that can put my dogs to flight, that would attack my dog savagely. That animal must be eating my lambs, So
right.
So let me ask you a question about the IUCN, and I don't want to get you in trouble with them, but number one,
I'm a member of it.
Oh, okay. So do you think that they get it right, and how do they? Is it a committee that evaluates this to do the rating, or is it one person assigned to it and say, okay, you tell us what the status is?
It's the IUCN is an NGO, you could say. It's situated in Switzerland, in Gland. It means the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and yes. And the heart of this IUCN organization is their specialist groups. And there is special groups, let's say, for all different mammals. I'm a member of the cat specialist group of the IUCN, and I'm doing assessments for black-footed cat, for sand cat, and I'm obviously also reviewing the reviews of other specialists of other species. And I was obviously also involved in the aardwolf assessment. And so how this works is that there's a number of specialists on the species coming together, and they considering all threats and population studies and so on. And I can say the population estimates are probably not very accurate because it's just difficult to assess it over millions of square kilometers.
Sure.
Because the landscape is very heterogeneous, and the land use is also causing quite a lot of variations, and also climate changes are changing it. But the criteria for the different threat categories are quite clear cut by now, and for an animal to be assessed as threatened, there must be a proven decrease of numbers, and that's very hard to do for wild animals. Some wild animals are secretive. You have to go out for aardwolves and either place camera traps, or you go out and do spot lamping at night to get sort of a feeling, how often, over what distance, how many aardwolves do I see in certain areas. And you have to do this over years and years and years and publish this. And the problem is the interest in some of these animals is very low. The funding is very low.
Right.
And that's why you get very inaccurate estimates. And that is the problem. It's just, I'm happy with the aardwolf assessment, because obviously I see aardwolves every night I go out. I work in the same study area for 30 years, working now on black-footed cats since 30 years. So I see aardwolf consistently, and I would say their population is not crashing, at least in this area.
Right.
In this area. That doesn't mean that they are not decreasing in other areas, but that's impossible. With a workforce of specialists and funding and so on, it's impossible to assess really accurately.
Sure.
So when you were doing your research and you were becoming a nocturnal creature yourself, what changes did you notice in yourself? Did your eyes get bigger? Did your I'm very particular with my sleep. I'm very disciplined. So I had to watch myself carefully, because obviously, my main activity period was 2 hours before sunset, because I had to get ready and do sandwiches and so on, and then drive off to the study area. And then, obviously, whenever the aardwolf took a break, usually between midnight and 1 o'clock, I also had a little power nap for 10 minutes, but I wouldn't lose the aardwolf. Yes.
And then I usually went to bed by 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And obviously, I had to do my mind games and whatever, use certain things, to fall asleep. And I also, made sure that I wasn't sleeping in a noisy neighborhood with barking dogs or people knocking on my door 1 hour later. I got very grumpy. I was very grumpy if people woke me up at 6 when I went to bed at 5.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
Then...
So I can control my sleep very well, and I'm also able to do power naps throughout the night. I could working on Black-footed cat. I can even do, I can sleep for half an hour, then wake up for 10 minutes, track the cat, and sleep then again for half an hour. It's not very relaxing, but it's,
right.
you never get into REM sleep. But I just wanted to tell you, your English is fabulous. It's just, it's probably better than a lot of native English speaking people.
Yeah, that's true. It's sad, but no, it's true. It's very true.
Have you been speaking English like all your life?
No, not really. I was raised by German parents, but I grew up in Japan, so I was reading an English newspaper, Japanese English newspaper, and then obviously I was always very interested in speaking English because it's the language of science, and a lot of articles were in English. And then obviously in the last year I have a lot of contact with English people, and I studied for a year in the US. And it's excellent. I have to rate you as not endangered in your language at all.
So I have a question. So obviously they communicate through scent and whatnot. And then what are like their vocalizations? And then do the cubs make little ones like, "Mom, I'm hungry," or how does that work?
Yeah, a very interesting question. Nothing was known beforehand except for the sort of defensive sounds, this roar, like roar. It's really, really deep and but they can also they can snarl like a dog,
right?
I mean, like a growl, like
right.
And they have a lot of small close contact sounds, which I was only able to record. I actually, at that time, good recording equipment was these big spools,
right.
Oh boy, that's old.
The big Sennheiser microphone.
Yes.
Right.
And I worked with these specialists on carnivore vocalization, which is in a museum not far from where I stay in Bonn.
Oh, cool.
And we identified a lot of different close contact silent vocalizations. For instance, very interesting, aardwolves can purr. They can purr like cats.
Wow.
So they purr while inhaling and exhaling. And because we had this hand-raised aardwolf, she was lying on my lap and she was purring. So very interesting. And
wow.
They have also a whine and they have a jowl. There's a lot of, but these sounds you hear extremely rarely, mostly during the mating season and when the mothers are caring for their cubs. So the most commonly heard ones are definitely, the defensive roar, you can say,
sure.
or in territorial disputes, and they're really loud. You hear it for about a kilometer.
Oh wow!
It's a really loud sound, like an explosive bark. But all these soft sounds like chuckling and so on, a lot of different sounds they can make. But it's not you don't hear it very often. And I think I'm one of the few people who have heard them and who have recorded them. So
sounds like it. Yeah, sounds like it. So then you said you hand-reared one. What do they feel like? Are they kind of scruffy? Are they,
They've got quite coarse fur, not as coarse as the hyena, and they smell, they smell like their food. They smell like terpenes a bit, because they eat these termites. And obviously the scent gland, the pasting secretion is a very, how would I describe it? It's a bit cheesy, meaty. Ooh. It's a very intensive smell. I like it actually. I got used to it so much that people complain, but I actually, when I'm in the veld walking around and I touch the grass and there's a bit of aardwolf secretion on it, I actually really enjoy it. It has a lot of memories for me.
Right.
And it lasts a very long time. These scent marks can easily be sniffed by an animal, because very often if the animal walks up to the scent mark, it dries at the air, and because of the dry air, it gets sort of it doesn't smell any strong. But the aardwolf actually is breathing on it, when sniffing, and with the moisture of his breath, this scent mark sort of gets activated again, and then they can smell it very, very well.
So you're saying these scent marks are like a fingerprint, is that right?
Yeah, you can say it's a long-lasting long-lasting sort of signaling system, that works without the presence of the signaler, So you have to call, like a lot of animals are roaring, calling, and that scent mark stands by itself. It actually says, "Hello, this is my area.
Right. Get
this
out.
is my identity. Stay out, unless
Right.
you're my partner or my friend." So
Right.
and I think that's a very powerful signaling system, that is independent of time. Anybody can come anytime and smell it. It's out there. It's like I think it's brilliant. It's a great system, and it's very hard for us, because our sense of smell is there. It's good for our emotions. We still are smelling mammals, but it's
Right.
not as good as that of carnivores.
Excellent. Well,
So
thank
how
you
many
so much.
how many cubs are in a litter?
Usually between 2 and 5.
Okay, and do they all make it, or is it usually?
No.
Oh.
Average survival after about 5. They start to feed with 2.5 months. They stay they're weaned with about 5 months from the mother's milk, and then they stay for another 6-7 months until the next litter is born, and then they get kicked out by the parents, because then they have to look for. The whole territory system is geared towards that number of animals.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap up here, favorite Aardwolf moment or favorite Aardwolf story or encounter?
To be honest, there's so many. It's difficult for me. It's just a shame to watch these cubs retching on their first food. That they're going to eat the rest of their life. So that's quite tough. And also, obviously, seeing how their movements are very awkward initially. Sort of the scent marking, this squatting over a grass stalk, and then wiping their bottoms on these grass stalks, and then they fall over, and they're also very curious. The cubs are very curious. So they sniff at anything, sniff at a tortoise or a hedgehog, and then they get swatted by a black-footed cat. They're really funny animals, and I really enjoyed my time. And then obviously I darted a lot of animals, so I have a lot of stories to tell, being bitten by an aardwolf.
How was that? Wait, let's hear about that. How did that go, being bit out in the African bush?
It was bloody.
Did he get your hand or arm?
Yeah.
So after you were bit, did you have a propensity to want to lick termites as well, or you didn't, like Spider-Man?
Luckily not. I was vaccinated against rabies, and I had a good disinfectant. So it worked out. And interesting. Like with all mammals, all animals you get to know intimately, they all have their individual characters, and this is what I really enjoy in my research. Is that if you spend a lot of hundreds of hours with some individual, you know their quirks. This one is slow, this one is strong, this one is laid back. It's fascinating, and that makes me every animal that I watch is an individual to me. It's great. That's what I really enjoy.
We certainly appreciate your time, and
yes, thank you so much, Dr. Sliwa.
Hopefully we can have you back and talk about another animal, because
those black-footed cats. That sounds exciting.
Black-footed cats.
I would love to.
Perfect.
Right.
So
Great.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sliwa. We appreciate your time. Also, wait, really quick, you have to share about darting. How many times were you darting or collaring these animals? And did you collar them?
Yes, I did 33 darting, so different 33 aardwolves I darted more than 50 times, and that's a long process, because these are small animals, and you can break if you put a dart in with a lot of pressure, you can break a leg, so that's why I was extremely careful to get very close and to shoot with a very low pressure. I actually did a sort of a high curve, I shot up and down. So I had to go up to between 10 and 15 meters from the animal, and that took me sometimes up to 10 days of finding an animal at night and training it, getting it used to the vehicle, and then finally be able to dart it. And then once I put the collar on them, I would obviously find them anytime, also in their den. Before that, I was actually standing on a hill with my vehicle and at sunset and scanning the surrounding and looking for aardwolves which were not radio collared, and obviously I had to radio collar all the aardwolves in my study area.
Oh, wow.
So I could get the social system going, I knew who were neighbors, and I knew who were intruders, and so on. So that was a very crucial part of my work.
No kidding. Wow, that's awesome. So yeah, so we definitely have to have you back on the show, Dr. Sliwa. Thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions for Dr. Sliwa, please feel free to send us an email, follow us on Instagram. Yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again, Dr. Sliwa.
I want to hear about how you practice your marksmanship for your darting, but that's the next part 2.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
All right. Likewise. Bye-bye. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. So Eliana, you got it from here?